The main aim of the session was to get people to think about why we're collecting data for advocacy, why that's important. Whether it's about wanting to look at a country's implementation, looking at what it is doing, what it isn't doing, how they can use that data to underpin key messages within a country that there needs to be done in order to enact the rights of people with disabilities enshrined in the UN Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities.
The first thing that we need to do is make sure that we're asking questions to people, youth and children with disabilities that we want to find the answers to. If we're not asking them the questions, then we're never going to be able to include them in our programming efficiently or in our data collection.
I would say that in order to make data inclusive, we need to involve people with disabilities at every part of the process.
To reach out to the disability community, you have to make sure that you're not just speaking to DPOs, but to all people with disabilities. So not everybody who's disabled is a member of a DPO, Disabled People's Organization.
The challenges of collecting good quality disability data, perhaps the most prevalent one is it's difficult to actually count disability, and that's because there's no gold standard of who is disabled and who is not disabled. Disability exists on a continuum.
The first challenge to collecting good data on children, youth and people with disabilities is that we're afraid to do it, and that the people that we work with are afraid to do it. There is a lack of understanding about how we can do it effectively, but the first barrier that we see is people being afraid and thinking that the task and the job is too big.
You need to make sure that you're respectful and thoughtful about the people you're collecting the data from, and I would argue strongly that you need to make sure that the information you collect also is shared with the communities you collect from, and that way they'll be more cooperative when you go back.
One of the challenges is that, collecting data on mental health and psychosocial disabilities, it's like any other area of development. You don't want to be collecting bad data. What's the point? And so learning how to do an evaluation in mental health and psychosocial disabilities means really reinforcing a lot of the basics of doing a good research evaluation, but adding on top of it a new area that people might not be familiar with.
What I've learned from today is that there is a lot of work going on to develop and test better ways for identifying and collecting data on persons with disabilities. The Washington Group question is one methodology, and there will be more methodologies coming out to collect data on barriers that people with disabilities face, and that's really, really critical.
Data sharing is a way to increase our collective knowledge around disability, but data sharing is also really important to keep us accountable to generating robust, high quality evidence.
We need to make sure that the beneficiaries that we're talking to and that we're working with know about the data that we've collected and know that how we've responded to that data.
It's not rocket science. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to make sure that disability issues are considered in the same realm as all other international development efforts.
People were really hungry for more resources and more practical how-tos, because it seemed like there were a lot of folks who recognized this was an important issue but felt that maybe they didn't have, they weren't fully equipped to start putting it into practice.
Lived experience of people with disabilities and the development of qualitative data is going to be much more valuable in many ways than quantitative data, because the real stories underpin the key messages, and often those are the ones that when you're learning or wanting to get over a message to a government or a particular minister and so on, how is it affecting somebody on a personal level can be much more compelling than a lot of figures.